Well, good morning, everyone. Glad you could join us for some history presentation. A greeting to those who are joining us online, too. We thought we could make it available to others and in the future as well. We're delighted to have Ruth Ann Montgomery here with us. She is the Evansville's historian, and some of you will know parts of this. We'll all know parts of this story, and Ruth Ann's going to put it all together for us. So come on up, Ruth Ann. I know, well, it's coming on 16 years of our history, so I'm excited to hear even more. Ruth Ann Montgomery. How's the microphone doing? Check, check.
Got it? Ooh, wonderful. Well, I'm very excited to be here. It's a pleasure to celebrate this 90th anniversary with just a brief history of St. John's Lutheran Church here in Evansville. I can only tell you part of the story. The rest of the story is yours to tell, and I'm hoping that today that you will be reminded about an event or a person or people that you have stories to share about the church history. There was interest in forming a Lutheran church in Evansville actually several years before it happened. Two ministers from Lutheran churches, or a Lutheran church in Oregon, held services in Evansville. And they were in the city hall from about 1932 to 1936. And many of the people who were charter members of this church were the start of that church too. There were no formal church. There was no formal church that formed at that time. However, there was a ladies' aid group, and you cannot do without a ladies' aid group. And the members met in homes, and then they planned fundraising events for it. So in 1936, the Oregon ministers had left the area, although the church was still going, and Reverend Higgy, who was pastor of Stoughton and Cooksville churches, he also came down and did services here. And he worked with the Home Mission Board, and they did a survey of Evansville. And they determined that there was enough interest in the people living here to form a church. And they found funding from the American Lutheran Conference Home Mission Committee. So you actually started out as a mission church. And this is where your history begins. It's a history of strong leadership in ministry and finance, hardworking members in faith, and the whole community benefited by the things that you were doing here in Evansville. There was a temporary church council that was named, and they started a list of charter members. And that lasted through the first year. Those listed on that list started in 1936. There was a church building on South First Street that the people were interested in because it was an Episcopal church owned by the Episcopal church body, but they had not had a resident minister for several years. The congregation had diminished either by people moving away or dying. So the congregation for the Lutheran church still had services in City Hall. And then Reverend Higgy suggested that the Cooksville Church and the Evansville Church join together. The Cooksville Church had been part of the Stoughton Church. And they needed to call a minister. So they called Reverend Theodore Highmark. And both of the congregations were so impressed with his first sermon that they decided that he would be the one they would call. And so he accepted, and he and his wife and two children moved to Evansville, and they lived in a rented house on South 2nd Street. Reverend Highmark's son described him in this way. He was a man who was interested in drama, and he used that drama as a very effective interpretation of the scripture. So he had theater experience, which was always helpful. He was well-spoken, he was articulate, and that bit of drama didn't hurt at all. He also spoke fluent Norwegian because his parents were immigrants, and as some of you know, the Cooksville Church frequently had services in Norwegian. And so that was a very positive thing that he came with, too. So he brought his talents and his ability to attract and persuade people to work for the ministry. And he believed that churches and individuals could prosper with faith, hard work, and education. Always an important part of the church. So on June 21st, 1936, Reverend Highmark was installed as the first pastor of St. John's and the Cooksville Lutheran Church as well. And the church was first called the First Lutheran Church of Evansville. But since the name of St. John's was on the stained glass window above the door of the church, they decided to change the name to St. John's. That's how you ended up. And he also started the Altar Society and a men's group called the Brotherhood, and they were from both churches. The Altar Society was just here, and so was the Ladies' Aid. So before the year ended, Reverend Highmark had helped write a constitution. He'd organized the men's club and the altar group, and the membership closed at the end of the year with 74 members. So there's the women's aid was really important, and they helped to finance the church and missionary work that was carried on by the church. So there were bake sales, there were chicken dinners, there were picnics, there was ice cream socials and bazaars. And most of these were organized by the ladies, and that would continue to the present. So one annual event that I thought was a lot of fun brought the two congregations together for good food and fun. And it was held at the Cooksville Lutheran Church on their grounds, and it was a picnic in July 1937. So Reverend Highmark had charge of the church services, and the men's organizations had charge of the baseball games, and the volleyball, and other sports that they played that day. And the women, of course, handled the children's games, and families brought food for the meal. So over the years, this was carried on, and they actually had a gold trophy that would be passed back and forth between the Evansville baseball players and the Cooksville baseball players. So Reverend Highmark also started one of the longest lasting cooperative Christmas choral groups. The combined choirs of the Cooksville and Evansville Lutheran Church organized in 1936. And the choirs were directed by Reverend Highmark. And the first joint concert was presented at the Cooksville Church on a Sunday and just before Christmas, and the following Tuesday at St. John's Lutheran. The choir had nearly 50 men and women. They sang a Christmas cantata called The Child Divine. And a year later, and for the rest of Highmark's tenure, the service was broadcast over Janesville's WCLO. And they would come early and set up for recording. And it was a live recording of the church. And it became so popular that they actually had to issue tickets. So if you weren't there 15 minutes before the service started, you didn't get to come in because it was already full. In December 1937, St. John's purchased St. John's Episcopal Church, and the sale was completed that next March in 1938. So the house next to it had also served as a parsonage, but as I said, they hadn't had a resident pastor for a number of years. So the Lutherans decided that it would be their parish house, and on the first floor, they would have a meeting room and kitchen, and then on the second floor, there would be the office space. So it was also the site of the Sunday school classes, because apparently the basement in the Episcopal Church wasn't suitable for that. All of the groups met, and by this time, there was the Church Council, of course, the Men's Brotherhood, the Altar Society, and the Ladies' Aid. And over the years, they would also allow other organizations in the city to meet in that. For instance, the Tourist Club, if some of you might remember that women's group, often met there. And the 5-year celebration was also held in that parish house. In 1942, Reverend Highmark resigned and went to Red Wing, Minnesota. And a few months, actually, before he left, the church purchased this parsonage. It had been kind of renting it from the Episcopalians. And the church members gave a great credit to Reverend Highmark for his leadership. And as you can tell from all the things that were organized, you had a very solid church going by the time he left. So his replacement was Reverend Arvid Romstead, and he continued many of the traditions that had been started. He was also a talented singer and performed as a soloist before he became a minister. He directed the combined choirs, and many years later, those choirs served as an inspiration to start the ecumenical choir that sings for church Christmas programs and that kind of thing. So the church continued to grow. There was a religious census taken of the whole city by the Evansville Ministerial Association in 1944. It had been less than 10 years since this church was started, but they were second in the number of people that claimed they were Lutherans. It was only the Methodists, the oldest congregation in town, that was on top. And at that annual meeting in 1946, Annette Heim, who most of you know as Annette Losey, was hired to be the first church secretary. At the 10th anniversary of the church was held on June 25th, 1946. And at that time, the church reported 377 members. The mortgage was already paid in full, and they ceremonially burned the mortgage. They held a banquet for more than 150 people at the Masonic Temple, and this photograph was taken at that time. Many years later, Ruth Morrison Gallmer she was present at this with her mother and father and brother, and she helped identify many of the people in this photograph. And there was a booklet made up of including the picture and a list of the people. She made a number for each position on the photograph and put in as many of the names as she could. And that's in the archives at the Eager Free Public Library. In September, during a Sunday service, some of you may have heard about this incident. The organ was playing, and the minister was standing up there, and all of a sudden the organist saw that her hands weren't reaching the keyboard anymore, and the floor was sinking underneath the organ. So neither one of them panicked, neither Reverend Romstead or the organist, and he quietly said one by one, "Please leave the church." And everybody did, calmly. And then they carried out a service outside. And it turned out that people putting in the new furnace had moved the posts on the floor and hadn't put them back. Surprise. There are the stories you need to tell.
And he was still baptized that day.
Reverend Robstead encouraged lots of activities with young adults and children, Boy Scouts, 4-H clubs, and others that were invited to worship with the Lutherans. And at that time, many of the clubs had a go-to-church day for their people. And this particular group is the Evansville 4-H Club, and they were coming to worship. But first they stopped at the library, got up on the steps, and had a picture taken. The problem with this photograph is that many of them are not identified. And I'm pretty sure some of them were Robinson girls and others that if you have a chance to look at this picture at some time, it would be fun to get them all identified. And when the school district had solo and ensemble contests, the church was used for performance of the students who were participating in that. So in 1955, the congregation decided that they were ready for a new church. So they had drawings made. The original plans were that the church was going to be built on the South First Street property. And the idea was that they were going to raise the Episcopalian church, now their church, and they were going to move the parish house. They were going to sell it and move it. And the original cost of this building was supposed to be $130,000. So they hired John Steinman, who was an architect from Monticello, and he was given the contract to design the new building. He liked that prairie school design, and it was to have a seating capacity of 300 and a choir section for 42. The dining room was designed with sliding doors so that the room could be divided into smaller units and you could have Sunday school classes and so forth. There was a small area in the basement for storage and a heating unit. And then also there was a secretary's office and an office there for the pastor's study. So when the 20th anniversary of the congregation was celebrated in 1956, the congregation had grown to 600 members with a 300 seating capacity church. So construction plans were changed. And there was also a problem with parking down there on South First Street. There was businesses, there was another church, the Methodist church. Across the street and down a little ways was the Congregational Church and the Baptist Church. So in March of 1957, they bought 5 acres of land here in this area. And 5 months later, the congregation broke ground. They'd raised $53,000 of the $160,000 needed to build the church. And they had a service at the church on South First Street. And then the building committee, the church council, the building fund committee, the senior and junior choirs, and led a procession of all the people down to this spot. And some of them were as little as toddlers. All ages came. And they got to the corner here and they saw that it was already all staked out for the outline of the church. And so they gathered around. Many of them brought their own shovels. And so you had the whole congregation surrounding this big lot and where it was staked out for the church. And they did a ceremonial dig, And that was the start of building this church. And there were a number of people that were mentioned in the news articles about this that you might remember. Robert Turner, Howard Becker, Don Cadman, Dr. Ed Krieger, Mrs. Fred Ringhand, Mrs. Leo Brunzel, Harold Spursrud, and Howard Norby. Now, seeing those names, Mrs. Fred and Mrs. Leo, reminds me that women were very seldom referred to by their first names. And sometimes I had to actually go to the obituaries before I saw what the woman's name actually was. Wow, thank you. So the new church was ready in 1958, and the women planned an open house, and they invited their friends to come to a style show in what they had decorated as the Gypsy Tea Room. So the first church service in Laying of the Cornerstone took place on June 8th, and the dedication took place on Sunday, September 28th of 1958. And Reverend Highmark returned to deliver the sermon. I think he had a special place in the hearts of the people, both here and in Cooksville, because numerous times they invited him back to give a sermon. He and his family also vacationed near Cooksville every year on a farm that they own. So the old church was sold to Fred Brunzel and torn down to make way for a new post office. Many of you might remember the post office being there. So the only remaining building connected with the first church is the parish house, and it is now a private home at 20 South First Street. And the 1960s post office has been raised, and the Eagle Free Public Library second edition expanded into that space. More than 20 girls and a few boys made up the junior choir of St. John's Lutheran Church. It was directed by Lillian Morrison, who's the mother of Ruby Davis and Joy Morrison. And the junior choir played an active role in the music of the church, continuing a long tradition of sacred music. And this is another one of those photographs that needs identification. I posted it on you're probably from Evansville site on the Facebook page, and I got a few identifications, but not more. So in the spring, let's see if I can, there we go. In the spring of 1964, Reverend Romstead retired due to illness, and many changes had taken place, of course, during his administration. A new church was built, and both churches grew in membership. A member of St. John's reported that there were 800 members now in the church. Cooksville had 300. So on September 13th, 1964, Reverend Orlo Espenland, I think I'm saying that right, was installed as pastor. And that same year, the American Lutheran Church was formed. It was a reorganization of the Lutheran churches. And St. John's revised their constitution, and shortly after the change, the Cooksville and the Brooklyn Lutheran churches joined together to share a pastor. So during Espeland's administration, ground was broken for another addition to your church, 185,000 addition. It was to be an education unit on the south side of the church. It was completed and dedicated in May of 1970. There was a large dining room, a chapel, a nursery, administrative office, a console room, and 8 classrooms in the basement. A new pipe organ was also installed in 1972, and at that dedication, a concert by Professor John Harvey, who was a University of Wisconsin music professor that had actually been the consultant for selection of the organ. In 1966, the 30th anniversary of the church, There were 3 women's groups by this time. They'd been divided into the Dorcas, the Ruth, and the Martha societies. So you can see that the membership had not only grown as people coming to church, but it had grown in the groups that were formed to support the church. And each of these groups had fundraising activities and joined together for the annual church bazaar. And a couples group was organized, and Evansville senior citizens and the Evansville Writers Club met monthly in the church dining area. Some of you might recognize some of the names from that period who were serving on the church council and in women's groups. Gordon Kasda, Robert Olson, Roland Strachey, Nimmer Adamani, Dr. Ed Krieger-Gwynn, Glenn Mankey, Gilbert Spursrud, and Peg Rosine. And the junior league and adult members of the congregation put on a living Christmas pageant at that time. This had been the late 60s. The program included a senior choir, a live donkey and sheep, and trumpet players from the Evansville High School band. So Pastor Espelon resigned in October of 1973, and Pastor Robert Garbrecht was installed in July of 74. And he served the congregation for the next 15 years. So you, Reverend Polk, have served the longest of any of them. St. John's became the community center for a lot of gatherings that took place because you had kitchen facilities and you had a large meeting room that could accommodate crowds. So the senior citizen group continued to meet there. They had a program monthly. The Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts had their banquets here. The Red Cross blood drives were held here. And the Evansville Writers Club and other community activities took place here in St. John's. You were really a community place. So Reverend Garbrecht was pastor for 2 anniversary celebrations. His 1976 was the 40th anniversary, and the congregation at that time numbered 994. Have you noticed a growth pattern? I should have had a graph. 754 of those were confirmed. The 1986 50th anniversary was held on June 22nd, 1986, with a special service banquet. And again, 2 of the former pastors returned, Reverend Espelon and Reverend Highmark. By the 50th anniversary, the membership had grown again. So there were 1,037 baptized, and of those, 736 were confirmed. And there were changes in leadership then after Garbrecht resigned in 1988. So you had Reverend James Hill, who came in 1989. Timothy White came in 1994. And during this time, one of the most significant contributions that the church has had for the community was the Evansville Ecumenical Care Closet. So there were 2 volunteers. Actually, there were 3. Berna Burnham and Ann Erbs get the most advertising, or whatever. Rose Mills was also involved in this. And they named this the Care Closet. It was a food pantry primarily, but they did have clothing too. It was located in your basement, which I remember as being very, very small. And in the first 10 months of 1992, they had helped 18 families. So they started off rather small, but this organization grew to include at least 6 churches. There was your church, St. Paul Catholic Church, the Congregational United Church of Christ, Oak Grove Church, The Baptist Church was operating at that time. Evansville United Methodist Church, Cooksville Lutheran Church also participated. And each of the pastors served on the board of directors. So hundreds of people have participated in this with volunteer time and food pantry donations of clothing, small appliances, food, and money. And others have donated to help repairs with the building. And there are regular food drives by the organizations in Evansville to help out with this as well. And so the Evansville community is supporting the poor of all ages and abilities. And you've been a major part of that. So in 1996, it was the 60th anniversary of St. John's. There were still 4 charter members alive. There was Peg Rosine, and then Mildred Spursroot, who had been a longtime Sunday school superintendent. I think her obituary said that she had served for 30 years as a Sunday school. And then Ellen Patterson, she's one of those that I had to look at her obituary because she was always known as Mrs. Lester Patterson. And Leo Brunzel was the 4th, the only man of the charter members still alive. 3 descendants of the charter members read the church history. Matthew Reese, great-grandson of Clara Reese. David Persons, son of Donald Persons and grandson of Anna Persons. And Barbara Lawrence, granddaughter of Mr. and Mrs. Martin Anderson. Now, the rest of the story is in your hands. I've described only a few of your success stories. On October 10th, 2010, your pastor, Reverend Matt Polk, started his ministry in Evansville, and he's served you well. The church has grown. The programs you offer are too numerous to count. What a success story you must tell. And by that, I mean you must do it. Strong leadership, stewardship, hard work, faithfulness, friendship, caring, and so many positive words would and should be used to describe your progress. What a wonderful contribution you have made to the city of Evansville and the surrounding area. You've only just begun. And as the sign says, all are welcome. Well, thank you very much for letting me join in. Does anybody have any questions that I might be able to answer? Yes. Let me get back to the dedication took place in September, but the laying of the cornerstone took place on June 8th. So after June 8th of 1958. Yes. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't too long after that, it was in 59 when they raised the old church. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ruth Ann.
Yeah.
I feel like we should just debrief for just a moment, shouldn't we? I don't know if I have questions for Ruth Ann, but I feel like we should just debrief. What a singing church over our history, right? I was struck by the choirs and the size of the choir and how the choir helped lead the way. That was one of the things I observed. One, I didn't know that the bazaar had roots all the way back at the very, very beginning. Like, I think there were even bazaars before 1936, and the Ladies' Aid were leading bazaars. I knew it had a long history, and Joy has been part of that long history here. And I think it kind of had a resurgence. When was that, Joy? In the 2000s or something like that? 2005, it had a resurgence then, and it continues to grow strong. But I didn't know the roots were so long ago like that. The other thing that really struck me was when you said the name Glenn Mankey, whose widow is still part of our congregation and whose great-grandson was in church today, and that his parents are living in the Mankey house, and little baby Bennett was baptized here not long ago, and I thought, what would Glenn Mankey think about that? That the work that he did is now a church home for his great-grandson. That's pretty great. Just think of all the, I've been here long enough to know like I've done a fair number of funerals for people who were charter members or who Ruth Ann talked about today. But just that profound gratitude of all the shoulders that we stand on, all the people who've came before and the risks they took and the sacrifices they made and the love and the effort they put into this community that we can be here today. So just to add with that note of gratitude. What else, Sylvia? Oh, nice. That's awesome. Nancy, children's choir. You did it all and led from place to place. That's awesome. That's good. What else? Yeah, maybe the cherub choir it was. Yeah. Yep. There you go. Yeah, Lisa. We have baby Jesus here. This baby Jesus. I love it. That's awesome. Thanks for that. I love hearing that. Yeah. With the live nativity? Now, it'd take a little arm twisting for me to get behind the live nativity, but if somebody else wants to get into the live nativity, that would be fine. Oh, Mrs. Kasna. Okay, good. With animals and everything, a live nativity. They're pretty neat. The UCC church was doing live nativities until not long ago.
Yeah.
I always thought that was neat too. Any other thoughts or, yeah. Yeah. Yep. And I think it's important to remember, like, we didn't just like pop on the scene over here, but like faithful, like Cooksville Lutheran Church, that's our mother church, and they continue to be such a good partner to us. And then they were partnered with Stoughton. I think we need to continue to think partnerships. The care closets, it's a partnership in town. And that's all still true, by the way. 6 congregations and the pastors make up the board. Yeah. Rich Craig just says distance. Today it feels pretty close, but back then didn't feel quite so close. Yeah, good point. Right. Yeah, a horse at one point, right, to get over to Cooksville. Yeah, 1936, not that many automobiles. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, Carolyn. That's awesome. Choir robes become quilts. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Sharon. Oh, gold robes too. Okay, all right. Yeah, Diane. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, Cooksville and Brooklyn were coordinated for a while. Yes. Nice. So you got credit for Sunday school at a different church. Yes. They did, yes. Yep, the stained glass windows in the sanctuary are a donation from the Adamani family. Phyllis. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, the old pyramids. Yep. And we have all the details on the design and the meaning of the pyramids that you did. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Joy. Hmm. Yeah. The Episcopal John. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I really do love that from the very beginning. Like, well, we'll be First Lutheran Church. Oh, you know what's already on the door? St. John's. Let's just go with that. You know, like I value that kind of practicality, right?
I think you'd have to ask the Episcopalian.
Yeah, where their John came from.
Name, yeah.
Well, and then back to that building, then the stained glass, there were, what were they? And they went to Iowa. Do you know what I'm talking about? 4 stained glass windows?
Iowa.
Something that, and where was it?
Pella.
Oh, Pella, Iowa. Okay. Perry, Iowa. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Perry? Oh.
Perry, Iowa. Yeah, right, yes, right. Also, I think it's worth just lifting up that we heard, I love that we heard a lot of our older history, but there were several pastors who served us in the 2000s. And I think part of it is just that they didn't stay with much tenure. And so it's just interesting to note, like, let's see, Highmark was about 8 years. Romstead was closer into the 12 or 15 or so, and Garbrecht 15. But then it was kind of 3 and 4 and 3 and 4. And like, I think that's worth saying, like, okay, there's been some tough times for our congregation too, where things were not quite gelling all the time. She's got them all. You want to do them?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I might mispronounce some. Paul Forty. Forty, okay. I got him from 1999 to about 2003. Brad Pullman, Pouhlman. He was 25, 26. Bob Schaefer, I have him December of 2006. And there were a lot of interims that also came and served you. And Pastor White.
Thanks, Ruth Ann. Yeah. 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 Oh, when was that? Early 2000s? Like 2003 or so, somewhere in there. About 55 people in worship in 2003. Ooh. Okay. Well, okay, so yeah, I'll keep going on that comment. The attendance, the membership kept going up. I roughly say about 1,200 members today is just roughly what I say. There's a good, do you think it's more? 13 something, says our statistician. And I mean, because we're always receiving, but we're always, having funerals and saying goodbye as people move and that kind of stuff. But our worship attendance, that's you hear, I tell that story often. I like that story. But if we were 55 in about 03, with online now, we're in like 320 or so on a weekend. Over 300 in person for this weekend. So that's it. Yeah. So, but again, God's faithfulness through all, even those hard times when it looked like, well, will we keep going? And then the faithfulness of people to say, let's hold on, and let's keep going, and so we stand on their shoulders. Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah, good. Yeah, good question. So we started, let's do the first one first, because I know that one. 2019 is when we became reconciling in Christ after a series of Bible studies and listening sessions, like how will we welcome and affirm all people? And so that was 2019. And then your other question on the emergence of the ELCA. The ELCA was formed in 1987. And so before that, we were a member of the American Lutheran Church, and that was 1969, somewhere around in there. In the 60s. And then before that, it was probably a Norwegian Lutheran, a Norwegian predecessor body. So 1988 ELCA. And so that's the history of Lutheranism in America. It was like lots of many. And then it was like, hey, we're pretty close, let's get together. We're pretty close, let's get together. And so it's from the hundreds of denominations filtered in through mergers. And then there were three main ones that made the ELCA in 1988. The American Lutheran Church, the Lutheran Church in America, and the Association of American Lutheran Churches, something like that. Three to make the ELCA in 1988. Yeah, thanks for that. Yes, Becca. Larry can speak Norwegian. That reminds me of another thing that Ruth Ann said, in the days before there were other community spaces like Creekside Place, how much St. John's was used for the community. And I love that. That's also a really beautiful part of our heritage. And whereas we don't, like even when I got here, we were doing blood drives and stuff here. And of course we could continue to do that, but we do have Creekside Place for that now. But the mindset of we are not here just for ourselves, that endures in our congregation. And there are still groups that meet here. Is it Magnolia 4-H that meets here regularly? An NA group, yeah, you need a space. You need we continue to welcome people in our home, but that mentality of we are here for our neighbors too. That's so important. Yeah, Larry. Oh, yeah. Yep, an open communion table. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Wonder how many people were unapproved. You? Not so nice. Get out of here. No. Yeah. Yeah. You were doing children's messages before me, right? No. Okay, well, 16 years of children's messages. Okay. Oh, good. Good. Oh, and this reminds me of something else. It's super important. Ashley Bowman, Reverend Ashley Bowman, was able to be in town last night, couldn't come this morning. She shared a mission and ministry moment with us last night that we recorded. So watch out to our YouTube channel and our social media and stuff, and we'll put that on there. And what reminded me is because Pastor Ashley said how much she learned from our congregation. And it was just really like, oh, she's like, I find myself doing this. And then it's like, oh, yeah, I got that from St. John's. And that's really exciting that we continue to, send people out into mission. Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 And to be able to adapt and grow and change, that's part of our vitality, yeah. Well, yes, keep going. May 30 and 31, yep, a throwback worship service. And we'll have like historical items out over the summer and that kind of thing. Hope to put some photo galleries up and just, again, that spur that gratitude for our history, right? So talk to Carolyn. Yeah, talk to Carolyn. Joy. And then Sil, and then we'll pray. Mm-hmm. Anniversary, 70th. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. 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 Chicken dinners. Yeah. Yeah. We reject that. Maybe we should need to bring a reconciliation chicken dinner back together. Yeah, we could have a chicken dinner. I mean, we know the menu, at least, chicken. They know some chicken. Okay, one more thing, Sylvia, and then we'll pray. Oh, the cry room in the back of the building here. Yeah. 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 Yeah, welcoming the kids. Yeah. Yeah, even today, the one just delighted little noises, that's just great. That's awesome. Oh, yeah, our internship program. Absolutely. We've had, with me, we've had 4 interns. And 3 before that. Okay, good. And 3 before that. And you spoke of our renovation. If you're newer here, it's 2015 that we updated the sanctuary and our facility, or 2015, a large update, about $700,000 update here then. Yeah, Jason. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. John Steinman, a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. Yeah. Yeah. Fire pits. Rich is remembering fire pits. There was a lot of brick up here. I have seen pictures. There was a brick baptismal spot and a brick altar and a brick, a lot of brick. We still have a lot of bricks. Like a barbecue pit. Okay, gotcha. Well, I hope you go on with this conversation but let's say a prayer together. God, our hearts are full of gratitude for this church and for your faithfulness to this church over its 90-plus year history. We trust that you, God, will continue to be faithful to us, and we pledge ourselves to your work and your love in this world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Thanks again to Ruth Ann Montgomery.